The lights were bright, the cameras live, and the audience buzzing with anticipation. It was just after 8 p.m. on a Thursday night, and millions across the country had tuned in to watch American Voice, a primetime political talk show famous for its brutal honesty and unfiltered debates. Tonight's episode was already trending before it began, because seated across from each other were two of the most polarizing figures in modern politics: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and conservative firebrand Karoline Leavitt. The set was sleek and modern, glowing blue accents, a massive video wall scrolling headlines, and a semicircle stage designed to force guests into eye contact. Between them sat moderator Paul Finch, known for never interrupting a good fight when it was about to get interesting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, flashing a tight smile, "tonight we're discussing the very core of American identity, freedom, what it means, who defines it, and who's being left out of it." Jasmine Crockett, dressed in a sharp white blazer, leaned forward with calm resolve. "Freedom without equality isn't freedom at all," she said. "You can't preach liberty while denying people access to health care, education, and the right to vote without obstruction." Karoline Leavitt, smiling with icy confidence, responded without missing a beat. "What you're describing isn't freedom, it's dependency. True liberty means getting the government out of our lives, not inviting it in to control every aspect of it." The audience reacted, half applauding, half murmuring disapproval. Paul turned toward Jasmine. "Congresswoman, Karoline makes a point about government overreach. How do you reconcile that with your definition of freedom?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "Let me be clear, freedom is not an abstract slogan. It's real and personal. And for many Americans, especially marginalized communities, government isn't the oppressor. It's the only thing keeping the playing field even." Karoline rolled her eyes. Spoken like someone who's never had to fight for a business or a paycheck without federal handouts. That was it. The air shifted. Jasmine's voice lowered. "I fought for everything I have. And I didn't need a trust fund to do it." The crowd stirred. Paul sat back, letting it breathe. Karoline leaned in, voice sharpened. "No one here is denying your experience, Jasmine. But stop pretending that government control is compassion. It's power dressed up in promises. And what you offer," Jasmine replied, "is freedom for the few. The rest are told to pull themselves up by bootstraps they don't even have." The tension became palpable. Even the studio lights seemed to dim. Paul, now gripping his notepad a little tighter, tried to interject. "Let's remember, this is a conversation, not a battleground." But it was too late. The line had been drawn, not between liberal and conservative, but between two definitions of freedom. One rooted in access, the other in absence. And the night was far from over. The tension in the studio didn't fade, it thickened. The crowd had gone from entertained to invested. This was no longer a segment. It was a standoff. Karoline Leavitt straightened her posture, folding her hands tightly on the table. Her smile was gone. "Here's the problem, Jasmine," she said, her voice clipped but controlled. "You want government to be the great equalizer. But in doing that, you ignore the individuals, the ones who want to live without handouts, without red tape, without being told how to raise their children or run their business." Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. "And you ignore the people who can't even start a business because of the neighborhood they were born into. You speak about freedom like it's something everyone already has. That's the lie. We're not starting from the same line." The moderator, Paul Finch, was now visibly tense. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So let's be clear," he said, glancing between them. "Is freedom about removing barriers or building bridges?" Jasmine answered first. "It's about removing the barriers that were built long before we got here, and then building bridges so no one falls behind again." Karoline shook her head. "No. Freedom means you take your life in your own hands. That's what our Constitution guarantees. Not fairness, not equality of outcomes, but opportunity." "You can't have opportunity," Jasmine shot back, "when your school doesn't have textbooks. When your zip code decides whether your water is drinkable. That's not freedom. That's a trap dressed up as liberty." The audience shifted again. A few claps emerged, hesitant but real. Karoline leaned in, voice sharpening. "You want the government to be a savior. But every time we empower it to solve one problem, it creates 5 more. Bureaucracy doesn't care. It can't. It's not human." "No," Jasmine replied, tone unwavering. "But people in power can care. And they should. If freedom is only for those who already have resources, then it's not freedom. It's privilege with better branding." That line hit. Even Paul blinked. Karoline's nostrils flared slightly. That's a nice soundbite. But policy isn't poetry. You can't legislate equality. You can't vote your way into fairness. You have to work for it. And some of us, Jasmine said firmly, have been working for it every day of our lives, without inherited advantages, without connections, without being born on third base and calling it a home run. The room erupted, not in chaos but in a wave of reaction. Half cheers, half murmurs. Cameras zoomed in. Viewers across the country leaned closer to their screens. Paul raised his hand slightly, trying to regain control. Let's remember our viewers, many of whom are seniors, veterans, working-class Americans. They care about freedom, yes, but also safety, stability, truth. Can we agree on what freedom should look like, if not how to get there? A pause. Jasmine exhaled. Freedom should look like being able to walk down your street without being profiled. It should look like a mother not choosing between insulin and rent. It should look like voting without jumping through hoops. That's what it should look like. Karoline's voice dropped into a quieter, more pointed register. And it should also look like speaking your mind without being canceled. Worshipping freely. Owning your home without fear that new taxes or policies will drive you out. That's freedom, too. The two women stared at each other, not with hatred, but with fire. They weren't arguing anymore. They were defending visions. And America was listening. The studio was no longer just a stage. It had become a mirror, reflecting two Americas, two ideologies, two definitions of the same sacred word: freedom. Paul Finch, the moderator, sat still for a long moment, absorbing the silence after Jasmine Crockett's last line. The audience didn't clap this time. They were waiting, listening. And somehow, even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to zoom in or simply give the moment room to breathe. Karoline Leavitt finally leaned back in her chair, her tone shifting. Less combative now, more calculated. You paint a powerful picture, she said to Jasmine. But emotion doesn't build systems. Passion doesn't write legislation. I don't doubt your sincerity. I doubt your solutions. Jasmine looked at her, calm but unwavering. And I don't doubt your intelligence, Karoline. I doubt your empathy. The room felt colder for a second, until Paul leaned forward, his voice deliberate. I think what we're seeing here, he said, isn't just a disagreement. It's the core tension in American democracy. One side sees freedom as protection from government. The other sees it as protection through government. Karoline nodded. Exactly. And history has shown that when government expands, liberty contracts. Jasmine responded immediately. History has also shown that when government retreats, injustice rushes in to fill the void. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. Paul asked, so where do we go from here? Is there common ground? Karoline sighed. I don't know. Maybe the common ground is that we both care. That we're both here. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. Caring isn't enough. You have to be willing to change things for people who don't look like you. Don't live like you. Don't vote like you. Karoline hesitated. For the first time that evening, she didn't speak right away. I believe in personal responsibility, she said at last. But I also believe in listening, even when it's hard. Jasmine nodded once. Then maybe that's where we start. A moment passed. Paul looked down at his notes but didn't read from them. Instead, he turned directly to the camera. To our viewers at home, what you've witnessed tonight is not just television. It's a window. Into what divides us, yes, but also into what might eventually unite us. He turned to Jasmine and Karoline again. Would either of you like to leave our audience with a final thought? Karoline spoke first. Freedom means you choose. You fail or you thrive, but it's yours. That's the promise this country makes. And we should protect that. Then Jasmine. Freedom also means no one gets left behind. It means the promise is real for all of us, not just the lucky or the loud. Because a freedom that leaves people behind isn't freedom at all. The audience applauded, not wildly but steadily. Respectfully. A sense of weight lingered in the room, but so did something else, possibility. As the show wrapped, Paul stood and shook both their hands. They did not hug. They did not smile for the cameras. But for the briefest of seconds, they looked at each other with something deeper than approval, recognition. Outside the studio, the headlines were already being drafted. Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt clash over freedom and find an uneasy truce. Two visions, one stage, a nation watches itself. The debate we needed. And in homes across America, especially among older viewers who had lived through wars, movements, and decades of change, something resonated. Not because it was polished, but because it was real. In that studio, two women didn't agree. But they didn't walk away either. And in a time where shouting has replaced listening, that alone felt revolutionary.